Hello and welcome. Let's chat for a bit about The Exterminating Angel by Thomas Adés. This is the most recent opera that I saw, and wow, what an experience. Thomas Adés, this is a contemporary composer. This opera premiered last year in 2016 in Salzburg at an opera festival there, and then I think it was performed earlier this year in London, and then it had its U.S. premiere recently at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. I actually saw this opera, see the Met HD Live series there. I actually saw this here locally in my local theater through the Met's Live in HD program. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll put a link to it below. But it really provides an opportunity for people, at least all around the U.S., I think, possibly even internationally, to see operas that are being performed at the Met. And so this is how I saw it. This opera, like I said, was just is recently composed. Thomas Adés is the composer. The libretto is by Tom Cairns, and it's based on the 1962 Mexican surrealist film by Luis Buñuel called The Exterminating Angel, but it's in Spanish, El Angel Exterminador. I'm not sure how to pronounce it in Spanish, but yeah, this sort of surrealist film back from 1962, and it was just such an awesome experience. This is the first live in HD opera that I've been to, so the experience of it was different because it's, we obviously, with seeing it on film or seeing it being broadcast, we're not seeing the whole stage. They're actually the camera's able to move up closer, and see the characters closer than we would if we were live in the audience. So that has its benefits, of course, but it also has its drawbacks because we're not allowed to see the whole stage at once, usually, because it would be too distant. And in a cast like this, there's 15 principal singers that are on stage the whole time due to the storyline, which I'll discuss here in a bit. So when the opera opens, there are these bells ringing, and there are sheep, live sheep. There were 3 live sheep on the stage, so immediately we know that something is not quite normal. And then the servants, we're in this kind of fancy house, I guess, and the servants are all frantically leaving, and they won't really stay for anything, not even to go back upstairs to get their belongings. One person, one maid's trying to convince, like, the cook or something, one of the other servants to go up and get their belongings, and she said, no, we'll come back for it later, we have to leave. So this is not explained, though, but, immediately you're hit sort of, the bells already caused this sort of tension, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but this tension, something's not right. And then the guests, the dinner party guests, these are affluent, wealthy, higher class people that are coming to this house for a dinner party following a night at the opera. And so they enter the scene, and there are 15 of them, like I said, and then this action sort of stops, and there's that scene is repeated, that sequence is repeated, where they enter again in exactly the same manner, saying the exact same things. So instantly, you know that something's wrong. And then as the story unfolds, we in the audience realize that they're staying there. They can't leave. And ultimately this dawns on them as well. They can't leave. They wind up, sort of being trapped there. There is nothing stopping them from leaving. There is no locked door. There's nothing like that that's preventing. There's no force field per se. It's just that every time they go to leave, they can't for some reason. And so, the night winds up wearing on and turns into the next day, and so on and so on. We're not really sure how long they're there, but with no food, the food eventually runs out. Even the water, and so their social veneer that they've had at the beginning sort of falls away, and we are sort of left with their sort of more barbaric selves, I guess, as the whole veneer crumbles. Like, for example, in one instance, when they're staying longer than the host and hostess had planned, and somebody takes off their top coat or their waistcoat, and the hostess reports like, why are they doing that? That's so like not polite to do. And so, but by the time, as time goes on, all of these sort of social veneers have fallen away. I'm going to bring up just the cast here so that you can see it. There is a large cast because, like I said, there are 15 principal singers, so there are 15 dinner party guests, as well as one of the servants. I guess there's 14 dinner party guests and then the servant that stay. One of the servants actually stays. This was, like I said, I saw this performance on the, or I don't know if I said this, but I saw this on the 18th of November in my local theater through the Live in HD. This was conducted by the composer himself, Thomas Adés. And so, yeah. I can't really go into all of the characters because there's too many of them. It would take too long in this sort of relatively short chat. But musically, each of the characters sort of have their own musical vibe. I think the sort of interesting ones. I'm just going to talk about a couple. The doctor. There's a doctor who is this bass baritone kind of voice who is sort of the voice of stability. He tries to grasp with rationality in the face of the irrational. But he sort of tries to sort of keep, I think, the party grounded. And then on kind of maybe the other end of the spectrum, the opera singer, her name is Letitia. Her character's name is Letitia. She's sung by Audrey Luna. She sung the highest note ever sung in the Metropolitan Opera, I read, in this opera. So I guess there was a little bit of a record broken. I think it's a really high A or something. I could be wrong about that. That's strictly from my memory, and I'm not a singer, so I'm not real sure, but I think it was a high A, the highest note ever sung in the opera. But yeah, the plot, I haven't seen the film, so I'm just strictly going by the opera. I read that the opera sort of follows the film pretty closely, but it's it's not so much a plot-driven thing. It is experiential, if I can say that. It's based on a situation. It's based on the experience. It's based on sort of the emotions. And, it sounds like when I'm describing this verbally that this room full of people for a whole opera, you would lose interest in it very quickly, but really that was not my experience at all. I was really drawn into it. There's just some of the other characters I guess I'll talk about briefly. There's a set of lovers. They actually, in some ways, they may fare better than others, and in some ways they reach a higher level of despair that causes them to take more drastic action than the other characters, I think. But that's one couple. There's a brother-sister couple that, as their veneer falls away, reveals very different sort of people than probably what they wanted to present to the rest of their family. There's the opera singer, like I mentioned. There's a doctor. There's an explorer / like a colonel. There's like a society, like a I think she might be in some sort of aristocracy or something. But yeah, just lots of different types of higher society people. But they each bring a different sort of reaction, I think, to their situation that they find themselves in. Although, like I said, they don't really. It takes them a really long time to become aware of the fact that they can't leave. Like it takes, the time really loses its meaning. So I can't really say this in days, but it takes quite a bit of opera time for them to figure out that they can't leave. And I think it might be, if my memory serves me, it might be the doctor that notices this first, that anytime anyone goes to leave, something else distracts them and they can't. But yeah, you can imagine by the time this opera is over, they're burning the furniture. A stray sheep has wandered in, which they've killed and eaten. They have some of them don't survive for a couple of different reasons. yeah, and then they sort of the way they figure out around this to get back to really, I guess, to break this sort of force that they're under, and this is psychological force. Like I said, there is no barrier to the door. Is to repeat the sequence that started it. But then as the opera ends, is these bells again, which sort of made me think that the whole cycle was about to begin again. One other thing musically, though, I mentioned several things about how each character sort of has their own musical vibe. I listened to a talk by Thomas Adés about the music and how he represents this sort of force of the characters like not ever leaving, sort of like revolving, and that's through the waltz music. And I didn't really pick up on this, except I must have subconsciously, because I really felt closed in this room with them. Not that it was terrorizing, it was just psychologically, I felt that. I really did. The other kind of interesting instrument that's used is a on de Martineau. I wrote it down. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that somewhat right. It is a early electronic instrument, and if you heard it, you would recognize it because it was in a lot of 50s sci-fi. I'll put a link to it below to an example of it on YouTube that I found. But Thomas Adés says in the interview that I saw with him that this instrument is could be seen as musically to be the musical representation of the Exterminating Angel. This musical force comes into the opera periodically, and it knows what's going on, even though the characters do not. So, I thought that was extremely cool, the way that whole thing sounded and the whole emotional state that sort of took me to. Yeah, so at the end of it all, what does it mean? It's a surrealist opera, I guess. I don't know, is it the first surrealist opera? I don't know, but it's based on the surrealist film, so I don't think it has probably a meaning per se. I took away from it as a meaning just that instance, psychologically, when you're trapped in a repeating cycle of something that is doing a great deal of damage to you, but yet you cannot somehow, you might not even consciously know that you're trapped for a very long time. And then when you do, and you start trying to seek an escape, maybe the escape's not readily, how you can escape the situation is not obvious to you. And I think this could be on an individual level. I think this could also be on a societal level, where societies also get in this pattern of repetition and not being able to escape or not being able to move forward, but caught in this continual kind of repeating loop. So yeah, I just thought it was just so cool, such a cool opera. I would love to be able to see this live at some point, and I will be watching for a performance somewhere, sometime, that I can maybe go and see this live sometime. So interestingly, on November 18th, I had an opera double whammy. I saw this during the day, The Exterminating Angel during the day, and then in the evening, I actually went to a live performance of Alcina by Handel, which I will do a separate opera chat on coming up very soon. My next opera is going to be The Girl of the Golden West. That's going to be by Virginia Opera. I got this little flyer in the mail as a reminder. This is coming up, I believe it's next weekend, so I'll have a chat on this as well once I do get to see it. Puccini's The Girl of the Golden West. Looking forward to this very much as well. So until next time, take care. Bye.